Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandan Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandan Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Srila Prabhupada Haribo 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 Nitai Gora Haribo Gaur Haribo 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 Gaura Haribo Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribraja Kacharya Astu Tarisata Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Nitya Pravishtam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribraja Kacharya Astu Tarisata Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai
Jai.
Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai
Jai.
Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai
Jai.
Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Go Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai
Jai.
Shri Radha Krishna Gopinatha Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai
Jai.
Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai
Jai.
Navadvip Dham Ki Jai
Jai.
Jai.
Mayapur Dham Ki Jai
Jai.
Jai.
Jagannath Puri Nilachala Dham Ki Jai
Jai.
Jai.
Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai
Jai.
Jai.
Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai
Jai.
Jai.
Shri Radha Sharat Bihari Ki Jai
Jai.
Jai.
Shri Radha Madan Mohan Ki Jai
Jai.
Jai.
Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi Ki
Jai.
Yamuna Mai Ganga Mai Ki
Jai.
Samveda Bhaktivinoda Ki
Jai.
Harinam Sankirtan Ki
Jai.
Jai.
Sankirtan Jagna Ki
Jai.
Go Premanandi
Hari
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 Bol.
Bol.
All glories to the assembled devotees
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
All
Krishna.
glories to the assembled devotees
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
All glories to Shri Guru Shri Gauranga
Krishna Shivaya
Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki
Shivaya.
Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om
Om
Namo
Namo Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om
Om
Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om
Om
Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
So, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, first chapter, Text number 3. I'll read the verse 3 times and then you all can repeat. Nigama kalpataro galitam phalam sukha mukad amrita dravya samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhur aho rasika bhuvi bhavuka Nigama kalpataro galitam phalam sukha mukad amrita dravya samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam mahur aho rasika bhuvi bhavuka Nigama kalpataro galitam phalam sukha mukar amrita dravya samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam mahur aho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. Someone else?
Sure. Hare Krishna. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam sukha mukhad amrata dravya sanyutam pivata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhui bhavukaha.
Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam Shukamukharamrita java samyuktam Pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam Mahur ahur rasika bhuvi bhavukaha.
Any Matajis?
निगमकल्पतरो गलितं फलं सुखमुखादमृतद्रवसंयुतं पिबत भागवतं रसमालयं मुहुरहो रसिक भुवि भावुका. हरे कृष्ण.
Haribo.
निगमकल्पतरोर्गलितं फलं शुकमुखादमृतद्रव्यसंयुतं पिबत भागवतं रसमालयं मुहुरहो रसिका भुवि भावुकाः.
Okay, word for word. Nigama, the Vedic literatures, Kalpa Taro, the desire tree, Galitam, fully matured, Phalam, fruit, Shuka, Srila Shukadev Goswami, the original speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, Mukat, from the lips of, Amrita, nectar, Dravya, semi-solid and soft, and therefore easily swallowable. Samyutam, perfect in all respects. Pibata, do relish it. Bhagavatam, the book dealing in the science of the eternal relation with the Lord. Rasam, juice, that which is relishable. Alayam, until liberation, or even in a liberated condition. Muhu, always, aho, o. Rasika, those who are full in knowledge of mellows. Bhuvi, on the earth. Bhavukaha, expert and thoughtful. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Purport. In the two previous slokas, it has been definitely proved that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the sublime literature which surpasses all other Vedic literatures due to its transcendental qualities. It is transcendental to all mundane activities and mundane knowledge. In this shloka, it is stated that Srimad Bhagavatam is not only a superior literature, but it is the ripened fruit of all Vedic literatures. In other words, it is the cream of all Vedic knowledge. Considering all this, patient and submissive hearing is definitely essential. With great respect and attention, one should receive the message and lessons imparted by the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Vedas are compared to the desire tree because they contain all things knowable by man. They deal with mundane necessities as well as spiritual realization. The Vedas contain regulative principles of knowledge covering social, political, religious, economic, military, medicinal, chemical, physical, and metaphysical subject matter, and all that may be necessary to keep the body and soul together. Above and beyond all this are specific directions for spiritual realization. Regulative knowledge involves a gradual raising of the living entity to the spiritual platform. And the highest spiritual realization is knowledge that the personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all spiritual taste or rasas. Every living entity beginning from Brahma, the firstborn living being within the material world, down to the insignificant ant, desires to relish some sort of taste derived from sense perception. These sensual pleasures are technically called rasas. Such rasas are of different varieties. In the revealed scriptures, the following 12 varieties of rasas are enumerated. Number 1, Raudra, anger. 2, Adbhuta, wonder. 3, Shringar, conjugal love. 4, Hasya, comedy. 5, Vira, chivalry. 6, Daya, mercy. 7, Dasya, servitorship. 8, Sakya, fraternity. 9, Bhayanaka, horror. 10, Bibhatsa, shock. 11, Shanta, neutrality. 12, Vatsalya, parenthood. The sum total of all these rasas is called affection or love. Primarily, such signs of love are manifested in adoration, service, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. And when these 5 are absent, love is present indirectly in anger, wonder, comedy, chivalry, fear, shock, and so on. For example, when a man is in love with a woman, the rasa is called conjugal love. But when such love affairs are disturbed, there may be wonder, anger, shock, or even horror. Sometimes love affairs between 2 persons culminate in ghastly murder scenes. Such rasas are displayed between man and between animal and animal. There is no possibility of an exchange of a rasa between a man and an animal or between a man and any other species of living beings within the material world. The rasas are exchanged between members of the same species. But as far as the spirit souls are concerned, they are one qualitatively with the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the rasas were originally exchanged between the spiritual living being and the spiritual whole, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual exchange or rasa, is fully exhibited in spiritual existence between living beings and the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is therefore described in the Shruti mantras, Vedic hymns, as the fountainhead of all rasas. When one associates with the Supreme Lord and exchanges one's constitutional rasa with the Lord, then the living being is actually happy. These Shruti mantras indicate that every living being has its constitutional position, which is endowed with a particular type of rasa to be exchanged with the personality of Godhead. In the liberated condition only, this primary rasa is experienced in full. In the material existence, the rasa is experienced in the perverted form, which is temporary. And thus the rasas of the material world are exhibited in the material form of Rudra, anger, and so on. Therefore, one who attains full knowledge of these different rasas, which are the basic principles of activities, can understand the false representations of the original rasas which are reflected in the material world. The learned scholar seeks to relish the real rasa in the spiritual form. In the beginning, he desires to become one with the Supreme. Thus, less intelligent transcendentalists cannot go beyond this conception of becoming one with the spirit whole without knowing of the different rasas. In this sloka, it is definitely stated that spiritual rasa, which is relished even in the liberated stage, can be experienced in the literature of the Srimad Bhagavatam, due to its being the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. By submissively hearing this transcendental literature, one can attain the full pleasure of his heart's desire. But one must be very careful to hear the message from the right source. Srimad Bhagavatam is exactly received from the right source. It was brought by Narada Muni from the spiritual world and given to his disciple Sri Vyasadeva. The latter, in turn, delivered the message to his son, Srila Shukadeva Goswami, and Srila Shukadeva Goswami delivered the message to Maharaj Parikshit. Just 7 days before the king's death, Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul from his very birth. He was liberated even in the womb of his mother, and he did not undergo any sort of spiritual training after his birth. At birth, no one is qualified, neither in the mundane nor in the spiritual sense. But Sri Sukadeva Goswami, due to his being a perfectly liberated soul, did not have to undergo an evolutionary process for spiritual realization. Yet, despite his being a completely liberated person, situated in a transcendental position above the three material modes, he was attracted to this transcendental rasa of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is adored by liberated souls who sing Vedic hymns. The Supreme Lord's pastimes are more attractive to liberated souls than to mundane people. He is of necessity not impersonal because it is only possible to carry on transcendental rasa with a person. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are narrated, and the narration is systematically depicted by Srila Sukadeva Goswami. Thus, the subject matter is appealing to all classes of persons, including those who seek liberation and those who seek to become one with the Supreme Whole. In Sanskrit, the parrot is also known as shuka. When a ripened fruit is cut by the red beaks of such birds, its sweet flavor is enhanced. The Vedic fruit, which is mature and ripe in knowledge, is spoken through the lips of Srila Sukadeva Goswami, who is compared to the parrot, not for his ability to recite the Bhagavatam exactly, as he heard it from his learned father, but for his ability to present the work in a manner that would appeal to all classes of men. The subject matter is so presented through the lips of Srila Sukadeva Goswami that any sincere listener that hears submissively can at once relish transcendental tastes which are distinct from the perverted tastes of the material world. The ripened fruit is not dropped all of a sudden from the highest planet of Krishna Loka. Rather, it has come down carefully through the chain of disciplic succession without change or disturbance. Foolish people who are not in the transcendental disciplic succession commit great blunders by trying to understand the highest transcendental rasa, known as the rasa dance, without following in the footsteps of Shukadeva Goswami, who presents this fruit very carefully by stages of transcendental realization. One should be intelligent enough to know the position of Srimad Bhagavatam by considering personalities like Shukadeva Goswami, who deals with the subject so carefully. This process of disciplic succession of the Bhagavata school suggests that in the future also Srimad Bhagavatam has to be understood from a person who is factually a representative of Srila Shukadeva Goswami. A professional man who makes a business out of reciting the Bhagavatam illegally is certainly not a representative of Shukadeva Goswami. Such a man's business is only to earn his livelihood. Therefore, one should refrain from hearing the lectures of such professional men. Such men usually go to the most confidential part of the literature without undergoing the gradual process of understanding this grave subject. They usually plunge into the subject matter of the rasa dance, which is misunderstood by the foolish class of men. Some of them take this to be immoral, while others try to cover it up by their own stupid interpretations. They have no desire to follow in the footsteps of Srila Sukadeva Goswami. One should conclude, therefore, that the serious student of the rasa should receive the message of Bhagavatam in the chain of disciplic succession from Srila Sukadeva Goswami, who describes the Bhagavatam from its very beginning and not whimsically to satisfy the mundaner who has very little knowledge in transcendental science. Srimad Bhagavatam is so carefully presented that a sincere and serious person can at once enjoy the ripened fruit of Vedic knowledge simply by drinking the nectarian juice through the mouth of Sukadeva Goswami or his bona fide representative. Om Agyanatimirandasa Jananjanam Salakaya Chakshu Militam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Gadadmaya Tadate Swavadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadha Shivasari Go Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, especially in this beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which fortunately you have all started from the beginning. This is verse number 3, first canto, first chapter. And you will notice that especially the first purports are very long and very detailed. I've heard it said many times that Srila Prabhupada, knowing that his life would not continue much longer from that point, that he placed a great deal of information in the beginning, especially first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is a classic example of Srila Prabhupada giving us a very broad-based understanding of a particular verse. Srila Prabhupada would say that my Guru Maharaj could speak on one verse of Bhagavatam for 3 months. So I listen to Prabhupada's lectures every day, and sometimes I notice the same verse in different locations, sometimes up to 7 or 8 classes on the very same verse, in like Caracas, Venezuela, or Los Angeles, or the Vrindavan, India, same verse. And it's so amazing how he brings out different aspects from that same verse. So this particular verse is telling us about the nectar of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And Sukadeva Goswami is presenting the fruit that's already sweet, but as he gives the example of the parrot, when the parrot eats the fruit, it becomes sweeter. So the Bhagavatam is already beautiful, and sweet, and nectarian. But Sukadeva Goswami, getting it from his father and giving it again to Parikshit Maharaj, is becoming sweeter. And in the same way, when Srila Prabhupada received this knowledge from his spiritual master, who received it from his spiritual master, and the process goes all the way back, when he presented Srimad Bhagavatam, it became so sweet that fallen souls like ourselves were able to understand, to some degree, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, we must understand that our understanding of Srimad Bhagavatam is quite limited. It's almost limited in an academic sense, that we study Srimad Bhagavatam and we learn things from the Srimad Bhagavatam. We learn verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam. We learn passages from the Srimad Bhagavatam. We learn pastimes from the Srimad Bhagavatam. But we should be careful to conclude that we have full realization of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Such a great literature, and ourselves in our fallen condition, struggling condition, we should not claim any ownership to the understanding of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's mentioned several times in the purport. It's respectful, to be respectful and serious about Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam carefully. I was listening to Srila Prabhupada's lecture this morning, and he was admonishing the devotees, seriously admonishing the devotees. Some devotee was doing something off to the side, disturbing the class, and Prabhupada said, you must listen, you must hear, because if you don't hear sufficiently, he said, this big, big building, he's talking about the temple, this big, big building will become a burden. He said, you will say later on that your Guru Maharaj is giving you a big burden because you're not listening sufficiently. You're not clearing out the anarthas from the heart. The anarthas, the unnecessary things in the heart, cannot be removed by some mechanical means, some adjustment in our mind that's temporary. These anarthas that are disturbing us, distracting us, taking us away from Krishna consciousness, or causing us to think that Krishna consciousness is not the most important thing. Those anarthas can only be removed by the process of hearing, sufficient hearing, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. So the stress is given to hear. So the sages at Naimisharanya and Parikshit Maharaj are all sitting there listening because he only had 7 days to live, Parikshit Maharaj. So he found out the most important thing is to hear the glories of the Lord. So for 7 days, without sleeping, without eating, without drinking, without anything, hearing the transcendental glories of the Lord. In the inside cover jacket, I'm not sure of the current edition of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but in the old volumes that we had for many years, in the inside cover jacket is this beautiful painting of Parikshit Maharaj, Sukadeva Goswami, sages of Naimisharanya. And I remember a class given by His Holiness Sri Dayananda Maharaj, and he pointed to that painting, and he was trying to explain this simple point, how to hear. So he said, look at this painting, how everyone is sitting straight, erect, and just listening to the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. And they're becoming more and more enlivened. It's like no one has to convince you to eat food or eat prasadam. Oh, you have it, Drona? You have that picture? Yes. That is the example of hearing. Sukadeva Goswami, Parikshit Maharaj. It's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Prabhu. All the sages are sitting, listening. So no one has to convince you the importance of eating. Now, maybe in the beginning, let's look at this. Let's dissect this a little bit. I know the mothers can agree with this. Sometimes when you have a small child and you're trying to feed them, they fight, because they don't understand yet the importance of eating. Then you have to, like they call it, force feeding. Sometimes you have to force feed them because they don't want to eat. And you're putting the spoon in the mouth with the applesauce or whatever you can put there, and they're fighting back because they haven't realized the connection between that stuff on the spoon and enjoyment. They don't understand that yet. But over time, they begin to get the taste, the rasa, over time. And then they start deciding which foods they like. But they understand the importance of food. Like there's a stage of realization called anamaya. Now we have pranamaya, viganamaya, but then there's anamaya, realizing our dependence on ana, food grains, food. So at a certain point, no one has to tell you, oh, you have to eat. It becomes something you want to do. So at a certain point in Krishna consciousness, no one has to tell you, no one has to regulate you, order you to hear and chant. It becomes a thing that you cannot live without. That's the stage we want. But how do we get to that stage when we have so many distractions? Bhagavatam has, as Prabhupada says in the purport, it gives all the information we need. All the information about mundane things, spiritual things, practical things, everything is in the Bhagavatam. So how do we get to that stage of enthusiastic hearing? Of course, there's many verses in the Bhagavatam itself. I'm always giving the reference to first canto, second chapter, and starting with verse number 17, 16. And I don't have it in front of me, but Shushusho Shadadana Sarvasudeva Kata Ruchi. So that taste for hearing kata, it comes by serving the devotees, those great souls. And then, when one begins to hear, Srinvata Sakata Krishna, Punya Shravana. Punya Shravana means that auspicious hearing, not this mundane hearing. Srila Prabhupada talks about the mundane hearing, like we read newspapers and novels and TV shows and politicians. That is not punya shravana. That is mundane hearing. And what it does, it actually inflames the pain in our heart. You know, yesterday I was listening to a little bit of the court proceedings that are happening due to that incident that happened a couple of years ago. And I listened for a few minutes and my heart started aching, so I had to stop. And this is what they described. They said that people, after seeing this, will probably have to receive some counseling because it's so painful to hear about how a man was murdered and this and that. And they actually realized that that kind of hearing, you're going to need counseling to get you out of it. It's that painful. But we spend the majority of our time hearing mundane sound vibrations. We need counseling. What is that counseling? Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is our transcendental companion. It's like if you have some mental disturbance, maybe Kaivalya can talk about that a little bit, how in his profession he has to deal with that sometimes. But when you have some mental disturbance, you need some counseling, or you might even need some medication, something to calm you down so you can recenter yourself. So we have our medication. We have Krishna Prasad, we have the holy name, and we have Srimad Bhagavatam. So when we hear Srimad Bhagavatam, it calms us down. Why? Why is that? As I said yesterday, I noticed there was a sense of hopelessness. And actually some of the people who were being cross-examined, whatever, they were saying they felt hopeless, helpless, hopeless. So sometimes devotees feel hopeless, hopeless. They don't have any hope. Why? Because you stop hearing the Bhagavatam. Then you start to identify with the material world. That's where the pain comes in. Because this material world is a hopeless place. At any moment we could die. Any moment. Life could change drastically. Now we're feeling strong, healthy, maybe young, maybe beautiful, good looking, nice hair, nice everything. Okay? Like Prabhupada said one time, he said, I've lost 50% of my teeth. Sometimes I think about how we have dental problems. So he said, I have lost 50%. But he was still blissful in Krishna consciousness, not thinking of this body, not depending on the attributes of this physical situation for his happiness. Actually, the advanced sages, they can enjoy happiness from within any place, any time, any situation. But the mundane people can't, so they become hopeless. Hope against hope. In fact, they're hoping against hope. Prabhupada mentions this in the 5th canto, this idea of hope against hope. There's no hope, but I'm still hoping. I have to die one day, but I'm still hoping. I'm sick, I'm still hoping. But then when that hope runs out, when they have no more hope, then they turn to intoxication. Sometimes people go to suicide. These are the causes. And we notice to be the case because even amongst devotees, this has happened. Suicide, going back to intoxication, going back to sense gratification, trying to find it. Why? Because you're not hearing sufficiently. I'm not speaking to all of you as if I'm such a great listener. I have great difficulty sometimes listening, but by Krishna's grace and by the training of devotees, by taking seriously what devotees have said to me over the years, I have some little affinity for reading the Bhagavatam. I mean, little, it's not like some great, but it's enough to sustain my interest in trying to advance in Krishna consciousness over 48 years. And to me, that's a great accomplishment for me, knowing where I came from. To sustain enthusiasm for this process for 48 years is a big accomplishment for me. I don't know about for all of you, but for me, that's a big deal. Mainly because of Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, Bhagavad Gita, Nectar Devotion, so many wonderful books, but mainly Srimad Bhagavatam. Every time I go to the Bhagavatam, it's like, whew, like if you're on a desert and you're parched and you need water, and you come to a small reservoir. It's like, wow, refreshed. But Bhagavatam is like coming to a huge ocean of nectar. So there are many, many verses and references to the Srimad Bhagavatam, and we'll look at a few, but the one that I mentioned earlier about how to get these negative things out of our hearts, the things that are holding us back, things that are disturbing us, that are distracting us from the sincere, serious practice of devotional service. And if we're honest with ourselves, we have to admit, yes, I get distracted sometimes. I get distracted all the time. Then I have to recenter. I have to separate my consciousness from this body. And that's a constant practice, seeing yourself different from this body. We still have to function, just like when you go out to your cars and you see the car and you know its capabilities. Hopefully when you turn the key on, it'll start. It's like hopefully when we get up in the morning, our bodies will start moving and we won't be, cut down by something. So we see the car in front of us and we understand its capabilities. We also understand we have to maintain it. We have to do so many things. In the same way, yantra rudrani mayaya. This body is like a machine, so we have to look at it. Like my hand is in front of me, so I have to, take care of it, wash it, put some lotion on it, whatever, move it. That, if you don't move your hand enough, it becomes atrophy. It starts to get stiff. So you have to keep it moving, keep your body moving. Like they say, you have to, when you wake up in the morning, get that body moving, get the blood flowing in your body. But it's not you. But you have to take care of it, just like your car. Don't take care of your car, it won't function. They like to say if you don't take care of it, then it breaks down, it's too late now. So your body, you don't take care of it, it breaks down. So we have to see it as separate and use it in Krishna's service. But it's not the all in all. The all in all is the hearing, which penetrates through the material coverings, comes all the way to the soul. What the soul is hankering for is that connection. And Srila Prabhupada describes here in the purport about rasa. I mean, you can give class after class after class after class about rasa, but we won't go too deep into rasa because it's a very deep and complicated subject matter. So that rasa, that spiritual awakening, that taste, that natural, and then there is a constitutional rasa between you and Krishna, your particular relationship with Krishna, which is different from everyone else's. We haven't come to that yet. We're not aware of that yet. That's a whole nother stage of realization. When you realize your personal relationship that you've always had with Krishna. It's not like somebody teaches you your rasa. No one can teach you your rasa. It's a natural awakening. And how does it come about? Through hearing. But we have to get through all these layers of material complications that we have piled on for many, many births. Bahunam janmanan ante gyanavanman prapattite vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudulabha. Bahunam janma. After many, many births in this material world, we come to the stage of Vasudeva, understanding Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Takes a long time. Takes many, many births. So we cut through, but the Bhagavatam is so powerful. Nasta praisa badresu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavat utama sloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. That's Bhagavatam 1st canto, 2nd chapter, text number 18. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So there are many aspects to this particular verse. And the more I read it, the more things just keep coming out from this verse. And the devotee pointed out to me once, or maybe twice, where it says, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. It's not like it's destroyed day one. Okay, that's why Bhagavatam must be regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, regularly hearing the Bhagavatam. These things are almost Almost means there's still some ways that we have to go, some distance we have to go in our spiritual development, which requires patience. So the acharyas, especially Rupa Goswami, gives us the prescription. Utsahan nistayadharya tat tat karma pravartana. One should be enthusiastic, but one should be patient and determined. What is that determination? Determination is based on understanding the goal. It's like if you're determined to get that college degree, how much patience does it take? You go the first day in the college, you say, I want my degree, and they say, get out, you're stupid, you have no brain, you don't understand. You have to go 4 years, 6 years. In the case of doctors, I don't know, 8 years, 10, 12 years. We could ask all you people, how patient were you when you got your degrees in that particular field? So all of this patience is based on knowing the goal, having an interest in the goal, having heard about the goal. Another doctor told you, if you do it, you'll have this, 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 and that. And then you become convinced of that by hearing. Look at the power of hearing, even in the mundane sphere. Something you don't know about, you hear about it. From who? Someone who knows about it. So simple. Krishna consciousness is actually very simple. You can apply it, you can see it, comparatively speaking, to the mundane world around you. There's nothing that's accomplished without hearing. How is it that we can forget in Krishna consciousness the importance of hearing when there's nothing you can accomplish in this world without hearing? Srila Prabhupada describes in one of the references I have here, he's talking about the most powerful sense that can save you when you're asleep is your hearing. Your hands can't save you when you're asleep. If a person comes to harm you and you're asleep, your hands are useless. Your eyes are useless. Your mouth is useless. Your whole body is useless except one sense, hearing. It's amazing, isn't it? If you're asleep, unless you hear some noise of some danger, you'll never know. Boom, somebody could kill you in your sleep. So the hearing function is so amazing. In the mundane world, they jokingly say you have one of these, a mouth, one, and two of these. So you should hear twice as much as speak. So this Bhagavatam, hearing the Bhagavatam, and Srila Prabhupada emphasizes over and over, if you don't do it, this Krishna consciousness movement, these temples, these buildings will become a burden to you. You won't see any value. You'll lose the sense of what is this all about? Why am I doing this? So knowing the goal will encourage us to consistently follow the process to achieve the goal. If we don't speculate, here's another problem. We see the goal in front of us. Srila Prabhupada has described it, the spiritual process and the achievements that one can have. But then we start to speculate about how to get there. And then we start introducing different things and ways that we might try to get there, ignoring what Prabhupada is saying in his purports and the verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam and other Vedic literatures given to us by him. Then we start to speculate. And then we have problems. We have to stay consistently on this path. So the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat, which this verse talks about, here is the remedy for eliminating all inauspicious things within the heart, which are considered to be obstacles on the path of self-realization. This is the purport to verse 1 Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 18. The remedy is the association of the Bhagavatas. There are two types of Bhagavatas, namely the book Bhagavata and the devotee Bhagavata. Both the Bhagavatas are competent remedies. Now look at the words that he uses, words that we know, remedies. You get sick, they give you a remedy. So the remedy, two Bhagavatas. Both the Bhagavatas are competent remedies, not this, like with the vaccines that they've been developing. They've been trying to see how competent these vaccines are. So that one place says it's 70% effective, 80% effective, 100% effective. And people get excited. We should get excited that we have competent remedies. And both of them, or either of them, can be good enough to eliminate the obstacles. A devotee Bhagavata is as good as the book Bhagavata. because the devotee Bhagavata leads his life in terms of the book Bhagavata. And the book Bhagavata is full of information about the personality of Godhead and his pure devotees, who are also Bhagavatas. Bhagavata book and person are identical. So that's so you should really, make sure that you have these verses in your mind and in your study catalog. First canto, second chapter, 16, but you can go further back, but at least 16. But I said go all the way back to number 3, I believe number 3, and just build your way through. Because Srila Prabhupada says here, systematically, don't jump. We're so impatient sometimes. We want to get to the nectar. The whole thing is nectar, all of it. It's not like the nectar is in the 10th canto, Rasa Lila. I want to get to the Rasa Lila. No. Every verse, every word, Prabhupada says every word of the Bhagavatam is fully empowered, impregnated with transcendental potency. Why? Because it's glorifying the Lord. It is the ripened fruit. We all know, we all have this experience, especially nowadays when we don't grow our own food. We go buy it from the grocery stores, whether it's Patel Brothers or Kroger, whichever store you go to, and you get that fruit that's not exactly ripe. You know why? Because they pluck it off the tree prematurely, and they pack it up, and they sometimes use preservatives or whatever, and they ship it to you from another part of the country, another part of the world. It's not ripened fruit. If it stays on the tree, like Srila Prabhupada explained, I'm reading in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he's talking about the pastime of Lord Chaitanya when the devotees were dancing and they were tired, so he planted one mango seed and the tree grew in just like a very quick time. And the mangoes there were skinless and sweet. And if you eat one of those mangoes, you would be satisfied. So Prabhupada says a mango, when it's, I think he said yellow and red, the colors are like yellow and red. He said, then you know it is ripe. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is a ripened fruit. The Vedic, what that means, the Vedic knowledge is not complete. It's not ripe. You pluck it too soon, and just like I said, when you buy some fruit from the store, it's not exactly ripened properly. You can taste this, almost like cardboard. It's just not the same thing, But when you take it from the tree, and you don't take it prematurely, and it's ripe, generally it just falls down, and you pick it up. It's so good, it's so nice. Or in the case of the disciplic succession, if you go to the top of the disciplic succession, and the knowledge is handed down step by step by step by step by step, then when it comes to us, it's sweet. It's not, not bruised. And when someone takes it away from that disciplic line and starts speculating, then it's not the same taste. So this Bhagavatam is such an amazing resource, facility. It can satisfy all of our demands, material, spiritual, and especially within the context of the rasas, the taste. We're hankering for this pleasure that we're not getting in the mundane sphere. But Srimad Bhagavatam, if we carefully, seriously give full oral reception, and then everything comes nicely. So that's a very beautiful verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. Another verse is so nice. Bhagavatam, first canto, 3rd chapter, text 40. The Sanskrit is quite beautiful. Idam Bhagavatam nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swastayanam Mahat. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it is composed by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes so many things, but just a couple of points. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu declared that Srimad Bhagavatam is the spotless, sound representation of all Vedic knowledge and history. There are selected histories of great devotees who are in direct contact with the personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of Lord Shri Krishna, and is therefore none different from him. Srimad Bhagavatam should be worshipped as respectfully as we worship the Lord. Thereby, we can derive the ultimate blessings of the Lord through its careful and patient study. As God is all light, all bliss, and all perfection, so also is Srimad Bhagavatam. So Just let that sink in for a second. How important the Bhagavatam is. All blissful, all successful, all perfect. So where or how could it be that we don't have enthusiasm for regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam? How could that even be? Unless we haven't heard enough from those who have experienced the taste of Srimad Bhagavatam. There's another point. When it talks about the book Bhagavat, the person Bhagavat. So if you hear sufficiently from those who have developed even a small amount of taste for the Srimad Bhagavatam, then your interest, enthusiasm to hear it will increase. How is that? It's like, I hate to give mundane examples, but they help sometimes. Just like with the vaccines. Some people don't want to take the vaccines. So what are they doing? They have a campaign spending millions of dollars to interest you in taking that vaccine. For what? The ultimate purpose of helping all society. Simple like that. So when you hear from experienced devotees who are not just, how do you say, let's look at the Bhagavad Gita when it says Jnana Vijnana, because there's knowledge and then there's knowledge by practical application or wisdom. So it's not, Krishna consciousness is not an academic program. I'm sorry to have to say it to us all the time, but it's not. It's not an academic program, even though there's academic aspects of it, which study, research, note-taking, all those things are part of our academic training. We know how to do that. But it's deeper than that. So those who have gone deeper and who are relishing the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada's books, they can entice you into it. They can bring you deeper into it because they have tasted it. They know it's real. It's so critically important that we get to a stage where we know this is real. That's called Majjhima Adhikari. The Kanishta Adhikari, lower class devotee, they are teetering. It's like Kamala Dala Jala, Jivana Talamala, like water on a lotus leaf. And the lotus leaf has a very smooth surface, so the water is in a precarious condition. That little drop of water can fall off at any second. So this is how it's described for the Kanishta Adhikari. At any second, because our faith is not strong, we can fall off and back into the material energy, become attracted again. So the Majjhima Adhikari can never fall off. They are so convinced. How? By hearing and practical application. Again, in the mundane spirit, they say, whatever you learn, you should teach that within 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours, so it becomes internalized. They talk about internalizing something, actually understanding it by practical application. So in Krishna consciousness, the idea is that whatever we're learning, we're meant to practically apply so it becomes wisdom. Then you become a wise old, devotee person, man or woman, because you practice these things. You know them to be true. When you know that Srimad Bhagavatam can remove all the inauspicious things from your heart, that's it. Then you'll daily take a bath in Srimad Bhagavatam. You'll dive into that ocean of Srimad Bhagavatam. Whenever you feel distressed, anxiety, frustrated, confused, because all of us do, you know where to go. I always give my little mundane analogy of the toolbox. You go and you look, you say, find a verse that can lift you up. Like this verse. Krishne swa dhamma pagate. Let me say that again because that word is difficult. Krishne swa dhammo pagate. Dharma ganadi bisaha. Kalo nasta drisam esha. Puranarko dunodita. This Bhagavat Puran is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. That's Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 3rd chapter, text 43. These are not just verses. Again, take that academic concept and kind of put it to the side. This is medicine. What did it say? Competent remedies. This verse is a competent remedy to get light in this darkness of Kali Yuga. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyananjanan Salakaya Chakshu Militamina Tasma Shigurveda. Spiritual Master opens our eyes. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is the none different from the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada has translated it for us. So all we have to do is go to it to get light. Now, if we don't understand, sometimes we're in darkness, sometimes we can't distinguish between being in Maya and Krishna consciousness. Sometimes we get so confused we think that the Maya way we're thinking is the correct way of thinking. You know, we can go deeper and deeper into that. We don't have a lot of time, but just sometimes we become confused as devotees. And then by the grace of the Lord, who's in our heart as a super soul, and by the quality of our service, hopefully we have done some sincere service in our life as a devotee, whether it's 1 year or 50 years. Hopefully we have done some service, bhajitam priti purvakam, with love. Even a small amount of loving service will translate into dadami buddhi yoga. What that means, when you get distressed and you get confused, Krishna from within your heart, because he's there in the heart, he reminds you, go read the Bhagavatam. He may remind you through a devotee. Like I told you the story how my temple president, Balavanta Prabhu, when I was really confused as a young brahmachari, he said, Balabhaja, don't you remember how much you love the Bhagavatam? Just go read the Bhagavatam. And I followed his instruction, and I was so happy. So now I know, after all these years, when I get messed up in my brain, I just go to the Bhagavatam. Stop everything. Read the Bhagavatam. Or Chaitanya Charitamrita like that, but Bhagavatam especially. And it's not that you understand everything that you read in the Bhagavatam. It's not about that. It's not academic. You got to remember, this is not an academic acquisition of knowledge like we are accustomed to in school. No, it's a respectful, consistent hearing. Just like you go see the deities. I so much appreciate how Mother Sita at the end of her program on, was it the Bhagavad Gita reading? She always, no, actually this program, she shows the darshan of the deities in the temple. So nice, you know, and we all stop and go, oh, wow, Radha Sarad Bihari, Gauranitai, Jagannath. And with the Bhagavatam, we go, oh, okay. Yeah, okay, it's Bhagavatam. I'll go to the class maybe, yeah, sure. But as soon as the deities open, wow, the deities. But that's called respect. Give that same respect when you're reading the Bhagavatam. Same respect you would give to deity worship. I mean, it's amazing how devotees all stand and sometimes pushing each other so they can get close to the deities, see the deity, and they have Bhagavatams and they don't even pick them up sometimes. Or they don't look at them with respect. When you see these books, it's like you have to look with respect. It's Krishna, just like on the altar. So if we've done sufficient service with love, not just service, service has a value in itself, intrinsic value, but loving service, bhajitam priti purvakam, loving service, where you consciously do it for Krishna, consciously do it for the spiritual master, consciously do it to help devotees also. Yeah. It's like Mother Sangita has a wonderful program with Vaishnava Care, lovingly helping devotees in the difficulties of their lives. Not technically, not, you know, okay, this is my job, let me do it, lovingly. When you give a person service lovingly, it's a fact. People know that. Even if you have gone to some restaurant, whatever, devotee restaurant, whatever, and the person serves you in a loving mood, the food tastes better. Like on Sunday feasts, you know, when devotees serve you prasad, and they go, Hare Krishna Prabhu, and they give you the nice little prasad, and they smile. And it's such a nice feeling. But when the devotee goes, boom, just sort of throw it down on your plate, you kind of, okay, whatever. You just take it and move away. But when you're that loving service, so take that and apply it to Krishna. When you make the offering, loving service. It's so funny when in Atlanta, when we installed the first deities in Atlanta, Gauranitai, the ones that Srila Prabhupada saw when he came and he cried when he saw them. They're so beautiful, Gauranitai. So the day of the installation, I'm just a bhakta, I don't know anything, but there was such a rush because we had never done it before. Everyone's just rushing. So the offering was rushed and some things were not prepared nicely, and he just got it on the altar. And this is like a miracle that all of us who were there, we know it's true. The deities threw that plate off the altar. No exaggeration. The plate flew off the altar. We're like, wow. Come to find out from the cook, he had put some things that were not so nice because he was rushing. So the deities, I don't want this, take it, threw it off. That's how we feel. It's a miracle that we all experience. So loving service. So if you have done any loving service in the life of your Krishna consciousness, when you need the understanding, the Dhammi Buddhi Yogam, Krishna will give it to you. He will remind you, read the Bhagavatam, study the Bhagavatam, hear the Bhagavatam, listen to Srila Prabhupada's voice, hear constantly. You cannot hear enough. Okay? As I said, no one has to tell you to eat, but people have to tell you to hear the Bhagavatam because we haven't developed the taste yet. So that rasa, which Srila Prabhupada so nicely described here in the purport, that relationship, and especially that original rasa that we have with Krishna, will be awakened by constantly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And I just want to share maybe one more verse that I wanted to give you. Yes, here we go. Two verses, actually. First Canto 7, chapter text 6 and 7. I'll skip the Sanskrit. The material miseries of the living entity which are superfluous, hard word, superfluous to him, can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service. But the mass of people do not know this, and therefore the learned Vyasadeva compiled this Vedic literature, which is Bhagavatam, which is in relation to the supreme truth. And the last verse, text number 7. Simply by giving oral reception to this Vedic literature, the feeling for loving devotional service to Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sprouts up at once to extinguish the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness. Last part of the purport. And it is definitely suggested herein that simply by hearing the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, one gets attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, and as soon as this is effected, the symptoms of the material disease disappear. So I'll stop with that. I mean, I'm sorry if I went a little bit long, but it's just so much nectar when you talk about Srimad Bhagavatam. It was just, I just feel so fortunate that, you all have given me an opportunity to speak to you a little bit this morning. So I'll stop there, Drona, Prabhu, if anyone has a question.
Thank you so much, Balabhadra Prabhu. When I hear about this process, and it's explained through Srimad Bhagavatam, and in this verse it talks about relishing the sweetness of the Bhagavatam. And in the Bhagavad Gita right now, we're studying the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Eightfold Yoga System, where Arjuna says, this process is too difficult and unendurable for me to do. And we see the austerity, and it's not a very sweet process. It's not a relishable process. And we find out susukam kartamavyayam, that, blissful. So the process is blissful, which you've been explaining is we just have to take not reject it, so thank you. And just in comparison to the 6th chapter that we've been reading, just so thankful and grateful to the devotees and Srila Prabhupada for carrying this very sweet process to us. Let's take some questions here. Mother Goloka Nandapriya, Mother Vatsala, and then we have Mother Renika in the chat as well. Why don't you go ahead, Mother Goloka Nandapriya.
Hare Krishna, Maharaji.
Oh yeah, I'm asking you. You're stressing about the process of hearing that we have to be attentive. But sometimes, like in temple, devotees are doing other service like making garlands and beading and doing some kind of. What do you think about it?
I'm glad you brought that up because from my training under my temple president, Balavanta Prabhu, who is one of my main mentors to this very day. In fact, I just spoke to him a couple of days ago for some guidance. So he was so strict about this issue you just brought up. Devotees working in the pujari room, cooking in the kitchen while the class is going on. Okay? So he made it a policy that there was a speaker in all those rooms, Pujari room, kitchen. Now that's only part of it, okay? The speaker can be there, the talking can be going on, but still you're not listening, right? Because you're doing your thing. So he made a policy that not only did you have to hear it, but at the end of breakfast, you had to write like a 1 paragraph essay. What was the class about?
Good.
Even though you're doing flower garlands and cooking, you had to still listen. And then you had to write at least 1 paragraph. What was the subject matter of the class that day? So when he trained me like that, when I was temple president, that's exactly what I did for the devotees during that time. Now it was difficult because COVID and you're not at the temple physically. But that's how I was trained, and I remember that to this day, how effective that was. That he made sure everybody was listening because he knew, because he had a lot of contact with Srila Prabhupada, he knew that if you didn't hear, that you would gradually lose the enthusiasm for Krishna consciousness. Then you start looking at how much work you're doing. Why am I doing all this work? Why can't someone else do this work? Kind of thing. So that was how I was trained to deal with that issue. You must hear, because otherwise it becomes work. And as Prabhupada said this morning in the Srimad Bhagavatam class, then the temple will become a burden. You will say, my Guru Maharaj has given me a burden if you don't hear sufficiently. So Mataji is extremely important, even when you're doing other services, to hear. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so I say it's not prohibited, like like
Haribo.
that's what I
Hare,
was asking.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Haribo Vatsal Mataji.
My humble pranam, glories to Srila Prabhupada. I'm hearing the echo. I don't know why.
There's no echo on my side. Anyone?
Okay. I learned two things, major things today. Listening Bhagavatam very attentively
Yes.
and being enthusiastic about listening. And also, you need to think, just like we want to see Krishna at the temple, we are so enthusiastic, we are jumping up and down. And the same way, when we open Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam book, we should see Krishna in there.
And you should jump up and down also.
Yes. When I do my prayers in the morning, I do jump up and down. I listen to my own song, and Krishna hopefully listens. And thank you so much. It is like a nice revisit for me to listen to Bhagavatam again, because we are not regularly listening a lot of times or picking up the Bhagavatam every day to listen. But this opportunity for us to listen every day is Krishna's mercy for me, Srila Prabhupada's kindness to me, that I can listen to Bhagavatam. I am so happy because of this. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a look at our chat real quick. Mother Renuka, she writes, Rodra, anger, and horror are negative vibes in the rasas. How can they be considered rasa along with the 10 other positive ones?
Well, as Prabhupada says, sometimes in a relationship, a loving relationship, when it starts to deteriorate, husband and wife, that kind of thing. And he gave the example that it gets so bad sometimes that even the horror of murder and suicide, these things happen in that so-called relationship. So these are relationships. They're not all positive. So to your point, Mother Renuka, they're not all positive, but they are relationships, and they are particular taste. So what you're alluding to is the idea that all rasas are positive, sweet, tasteful things, but they're not, as Srila Prabhupada mentioned in the beginning of the purport. So yes, the real rasa that's being perverted in hara, because there's no hara in the spiritual world, number one, okay? In those original rasas, there's none of that hara, anger, lust, none of those things are there. They are perversions of the original rasa, and that's what we see in the mundane material world. But your point is absolutely correct, that real rasa is absolutely positive, okay? In the real state, the pure state, it's all positive. In the mundane, perverted state, what used to be, or what it is in the spiritual world, becomes perverted. So there's no perversion in the spiritual world. The loving relationship between Krishna and Radharani and the gopis and the cowherd boys and the residents of Vrindavan, all those things are free of, there's like inebrieties. There's nothing negative in those relationships. But when we come into the material world, it becomes perverted. So what you're seeing with the hara, the anger, all that stuff, that's a perversion of the original transcendental rasa. Now, those things are described in great detail in the Nectar Devotion. So if you have Nectar Devotion and you have the patience to go through it, it's in the first wave. There's 3 waves, I believe, in the Nectar Devotion. So in the second wave, it gets more into the rasas. I mean, there's so many details about the rasas there. It's like mind-boggling. It's a great study for you if you look at Nectar Devotion. Not even so much Nectar of Instruction, but Nectar Devotion, where it goes into great details about the rasas. But that's my small understanding, is that the original rasas are all sweet. They're all positive. But when they come into this material world, it becomes perverted. And that's what we see things being described as rasas, which are perversions of the original relationship with Krishna, which is all positive, all blissful, all transcendental. Okay? Anything else?
Thank you, Balabhadra Prabhu. I think that's all the questions that we have. We're right around 9 o'clock. So it'll be a good time to conclude here. Again, our gratitude to you, for leading us in the session, beginning with Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a great time to refocus, and I'm really glad that we came back to the beginning. Each of these first 3 verses, we've heard instructions from Srila Prabhupada about you shouldn't jump to the 10th canto and you shouldn't jump in over your head. So this is kind of confirmation that we made the right decision to come back to the first canto. So we'll conclude here. Just a reminder that tonight at 6:45 we have Brahma Samhita recitation. If you want to learn the Brahma Samhita, join us at 6:45. And then at 7 o'clock, we have the Srila Prabhupada Leela reading. Please hear about Srila Prabhupada's pastimes and how he interacted with the devotees and formed the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Everybody have a wonderful Krishna conscious day.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for a nice
Haribol.
nectar.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Haribol.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Appreciate everything you do. Thanks a lot.
Haribol.
Haribo.